I just watched Miami's entire spring football game, and my number one takeaway couldn't be simpler. You're not going to be able to keep Malachi Toney off the field this season.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the Everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just got back from the spring game. We'll talk about Mario Cristobal confirming the status of Carson Beck. It's going to be cleared to throw by Monday and what that means moving forward. I'll give you guys my reactions beyond my number one takeaway, because my number one takeaway, guys, when I looked at who made plays on either side of the football, offense, defense, special teams, the guy who certainly popped the most was the most exciting player out there at Cobb Stadium on Saturday. Malachi Toney, true freshman receiver. And Malachi Toney is not just a true freshman. He's an early enrollee, reclassified true freshman. Not only should this guy still be in high school right now, Malachi Toney should still be in high school a year from now, reclassified from 2026 to 2025. Now, if you watched him in American Heritage, I know a lot of people in my audience did, like you already kind of knew, yeah, this guy is ready for college ball. But after watching him throughout spring football and watching him today in spring practice, it is evident Malachi Toney is going to get on the field a lot this year. I don't care if he starts or not. You're going to find a role for Malachi Toney. This young man can be an absolute weapon in this offense. So how the spring game went today, these scoring systems always confuse me, right? I know the white team, which was led by the first team defense, beat the orange team led by the first team offense by a score of 25-20. Now, with the scoring system for the orange team, the offense, it's scored as normal, touchdowns, 6 points, extra point makes it 7 points, field goal, whatever. On defense, it was a touchdown is 7 points, a takeaway is 3 points. They had some takeaways today. A 3 and out goes for 3 points, a stop 2 point or a sack or a TFL is 1 point. A safety is 2 points. So, the defense ends up beating the offense 25-20. But as far as Malachi Toney goes, he made a number of catches today, and his explosiveness and his shiftiness is evident when this guy's got the ball in his hands. And he managed to get open a lot. He scored a 27-yard touchdown reception on a pass from Emory Williams. He also caught a big play, a 35-yard pass from Luke Nickel on a 3rd and 9 for a first down, made a handful of other plays. Aside from Toney, who I thought was the guy who absolutely popped most, a couple of other players who I thought stood out on Saturday and had good performances. Running back Jordan Lyle had some good carries, and also freshman running back Gerard Pringle showed a lot of explosiveness. He had a big, I think a 25, my yardages might be a little bit off because they weren't keeping official stats. I'm like counting the hashes on the side of the field to figure out how far some of these plays went, but I think it was like a 25-yard run that Gerard Pringle had on the first series when he was in the game. He was able to bounce it to the outside and get to the sideline. Really exciting stuff. He's very explosive and very decisive for hitting the hole, seems to have really good instincts. And I know in the case of Gerard Pringle, this is someone who's really been peaking in practice lately because he did miss some time in the spring. He was banged up. So he was around like at the very beginning and then kind of back towards the end. And it really looks like the game is starting to slow down for a guy like Gerard Pringle. I mentioned Malachi having a really good performance. Like, he wasn't the only receiver who had some good plays. Ray Joseph, a guy he's competing with for reps and for a starting spot. Ray caught a touchdown from Luke Nickel today. I thought Ray Joseph played pretty well. Saw a lot of reps for CJ Daniels at receiver. And I just want you guys to know that, there were some players who did not play and did not start in the spring game on Saturday. Because in Cristobal's words, he had guys that were banged up or nicked up a little bit, and they were cautious with certain guys. I'll give you a few examples. We did not see Elijah Lofton in the spring game. He did not play. I'm assuming it's nothing serious because Elijah Lofton literally was part of all of the 14 previous practices in spring. So he hadn't missed any time up until this point. We didn't see Elijah Lofton today. We didn't see Josiah Trader today. JoJo, who I know we were all really looking forward to watching, has been practicing really well throughout the spring. We'll have to wait a little longer to see JoJo out there again. We didn't see Ruben Bain or Akeem Mesidor on defense. I'm sure there's some others that I'm forgetting that did not suit up and play today. But just to give you some examples, if there are certain players I don't talk about, that might mean they didn't play today. Someone I know you guys are curious about the quarterbacks. Honestly, the quarterback who was the most exciting to watch today, and I thought, just made the most plays, was Luke Nickel, the true freshman. He had some good scrambles. He attacked downfield more than the other quarterbacks did. It wasn't a perfect day for Luke. Cristobal talked about it afterwards. He made a couple of decisions that are a little regrettable, but true freshman stuff. At one point, he threw an interception to Isaiah Taylor. Jason Taylor's son made a nice play on the ball, picked it off. Nickel also, on a play where he was scrambling, he threw the football, what would have been a completion, but he was actually beyond the line of scrimmage. So that was just, a mental lapse there. He should have kept running or thrown it away before that. But one thing that, and I can't remember if it was because there were a few guys that I was talking to on the sidelines during the game. It was either my guy Gio Million or my guy D Money from Canes Insight who said this about Luke. I think it might have been Gio who said it. Luke Nickel, he's thrown a lot of interceptions in spring, but it's a lot of stuff where Nickel, being the true freshman who had a great high school career, won 2 consecutive state championships in Georgia, as he's adapting to the speed of the college game and the type of defenses he's going up against, I think Miami's defense, I think, is going to be really good this year. A lot of it is kind of him seeing how much he can get away with, right? That sometimes you have to fail and make mistakes to learn. And this is not to say that Luke didn't have a good game. I thought Luke did have a really good game. I mentioned a couple of, mental errors that he had today, but outside of that, I think anyone who watched the spring game today would probably agree with me. He was the most exciting of the 3 quarterbacks to watch. Like he looks like he has something. Like he looks like he's going to be a quarterback of the future. For Emory Williams today, he ran the offense competently, and Emory, I think, had a really high completion percentage today, but not a whole lot of downfield stuff. He did have the touchdown pass that he threw to Malachi Toney, which was a really good throw and catch, but a lot of stuff was thrown behind the line of scrimmage, not a whole lot thrown downfield. Same thing with Judd Anderson. Judd did throw a couple of interceptions today, had an interception he threw to Dylan Day. It's nice to see Dylan Day get a pick. He's had a good spring. Dylan Day actually fumbled the return of the interception, was recovered by tight end Brock Schott on the offense. So the offense ended up getting it back, and then Judd threw an interception to Amari Wallace, the true freshman defensive back, on the very next play. So that was not a great sequence. And, all of the quarterbacks, they had their moments. I thought Luke, to me, looked like the most exciting out of the 3. And just so you guys know, in terms of like the tone of the spring game today, it was not as electric offensively, certainly, as it was last year. I mean, we all remember last year, Cam Ward went I don't remember the stats, like 30 for 35 for 1,000,000 yards. So you can quote me on that. Cam Ward threw for 1,000,000 yards in the spring game last year. We didn't have anything quite that exciting, but I think part of that is the defense played a lot better in this spring game than the defense did last year. And we'll talk a little bit more about that because there were some defensive players who I thought did really well today, despite some of the first teamers being out. So, guys, we're fresh from the spring game, and I know we all wish that it was televised, and so you're having to rely on people like me who are out there to give you our intel, to give you our observations, and I appreciate you guys coming here, and we're only getting started. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Guys, it is almost tax day, and this is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now on turbotax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time update only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the defense, I thought, did better today than they did in last year's spring game. And it's a little bit, it feels a little more normal. Like, as someone who's been covering college and professional football for a couple of decades, like, it does feel a little bit more normal when the defense is ahead of the offense this time of year. Also, keeping in mind that Miami's starting quarterback did not play today. Carson Beck did not play in the spring game. So there's also that. I wonder how different things would have been if Beck had played today. But the defense, for example, the first team defense had an impressive goal line stand early on against the first team offense. The offense was way down, I think, inside the 5-yard line, 4 downs. And ultimately, Raul Popo Aguirre, linebacker, who is, I think, trending into an important year, made a big, decisive tackle on a Mark Fletcher run on 4th and goal. And obviously, when your defense has a goal line stand against your offense, it's that whole thing where it's like, how much do we praise the defense? How much are we disappointed in the offense? Mario Cristobal talked about it after the game. And of course, Cristobal being the offensive lineman, he was frustrated from that aspect. Like, hey, I got one of the biggest offensive lines in America. How come we couldn't get enough push to get into the end zone? But he also had to admit his defense did a really good job with penetration. And for Raul Aguirre, that was a really good play, to ultimately blow up a Mark Fletcher run that, could have been or maybe should have been a touchdown. And we all know Fletch is good in the red zone. So it's not as if Mark Fletcher isn't a proven, battle-tested guy down near the goal line. And, we know how good Miami's offense is, or at least is supposed to be. So outside of the goal line stand, where the offense, didn't do well enough, I thought the starting offensive line had a good day. And the starters today, Markel Bell at left tackle, Ryan Rodriguez at left guard, James Brockermeyer at center, Inez Cooper right guard, Cece Mauinoa right tackle. That was your starting offensive line. Now, your first team defensive line, remember I mentioned Bain and Mesidor did not play today. Your first team defensive line were Marquise Lightfoot and Armando Blunt on the ends. I thought they did well. And Justin Scott and David Blay on the inside. Justin Scott, I thought, had a really solid performance in the spring game. And, he seems, optimistic about the progress of the defense. We spoke to Scott after the spring game, and I thought he performed well. And I think he's on track to be a top guy on that defensive line this year. Armando Blunt, I thought, also did really well. And a backup defensive lineman who I thought had a really good spring game today, and a guy we don't talk about nearly enough here, was Elias Rudolph. He was disruptive today, and he was credited with a sack. I thought he made some big-time plays. I mentioned interceptions. The defense had a few of those in addition to a couple of forced fumbles. For the interceptions, Dylan Day, Amari Wallace, true freshman, Isaiah Taylor, son of Jason, they all had interceptions today. Day fumbled his interception, but he's been having a good spring, so I'll forgive him for that. Another offensive player, I probably could have talked about this guy a little bit earlier, but some of you are going to be like, who? But remember this name, an offensive player who performed really well. Walk-on tight end, Owen Ruskovich, number 44. He made some big-time catches. And it's like, I'm looking at like, Ruskovich keeps getting open, and Owen Ruskovich has had a good spring. I got to give credit to D Money from Kane's Insight because he's been talking about Ruskovich for a while. Maybe it's time to get this dude a scholarship if he keeps performing like this. I mean, a walk-on tight end. I thought he had a good game. And so, there were, it wasn't, again, not the, it was vanilla, I think, on offense, which is probably by design, right? Because even though the spring game wasn't televised, I don't think Shannon Dawson and Mario Cristobal went into this thing today. It's like, Shannon, just empty out the playbook, throw a little bit of everything. Like, no, I think it was very vanilla by design. And so, it wasn't it. I thought I had a good time out there, and I think most of the fans that were out there had a good time. It wasn't the laser show that we got last year with Cam Ward putting up crazy numbers, but I also appreciate the fact that the defense stepped up a little bit. I mentioned, forcing fumbles. It was hard. I might have missed a couple of the forced fumbles. There was one early. Mark Fletcher had a fumble on the first team offensive drive. It was on a reception where he put the ball to the turf. Fletcher ended up recovering and having a pretty good spring game. But again, I really thought Jordan Lyle today was a top player on offense, and Gerard Pringle had some moments as well at running back. A bit of news that came after the spring game, really confirmation of news, because Brandon Marcello of 24/7 Sports reported on Friday night that Mario Cristobal told him Carson Beck is going to be cleared to throw on Monday, right? Cristobal today, in front of a media scrum, he confirmed that timetable, that Carson Beck is about to get his clearance to throw. And also, I thought where Cristobal expanded my understanding of the situation was, like, he confirmed the amount of player-led practices that are going to happen between now and training camp, which starts usually in late July. There's going to be 16 player-led practice sessions. And in Cristobal's words, Carson Beck is going to be available for every single one of those. So, again, for him having to miss spring ball, obviously not an ideal situation, but, they needed to get him recovered from that UCL elbow surgery. He's fully recovered from that now. He's been rehabbing. He has been practicing, just not, throwing, which is obviously a big part of a quarterback's job. But he's now going to have that clearance to throw. And there's actually going to be 16 player-led practices. That's actually more than the number of official spring practices. There are 15 spring practices that happen over the past 6 weeks. Over the past 6 weeks, there's going to be 16 player-led practices now. So Beck is going to have that opportunity, and he's going to have the amount of time that he needs to get on the same page with all of his receivers. That was something that I asked Malachi Toney about after the spring game today. And, Toney said that he's really looking forward to getting out there and building more of that understanding, that chemistry, and that friendship, with Carson Beck, that he's looking forward to being able to get out on the field and work with him. And obviously Toney is someone that, whether it's Emory or Judd or Luke Nickel throwing him the football, he seems to thrive no matter which quarterback he's working with. But Malachi is going to be able to put in that extra time and build that extra chemistry with quarterback one. So 16 player-led practices, that's a really good amount. And this is going to be the chance for Carson Beck to really get ahead of the curve before August 30th against Notre Dame. It's going to be here before we know it. One of the things, I'm so appreciative of how many folks out there, how many listeners and viewers we met out there. And I was texting earlier with Bruce Warner, the truth teller, didn't make it out to the spring game today. He didn't want to be in the sun. And it was sunny. It was a beautiful day, and not a cloud in the sky, but it was sunny out there. Bruce Warner didn't end up making it down. And several of you, Locked On Canes everydayers, you were asking me, like, Donno, I'm happy to see you, but where's the truth teller? We got to get the truth teller. Like, whenever Canes Fest is, when they do the open fall practice, we got to get the truth teller down for that. So we got to have a meet and greet with him included in that as well. I want to send a shout out to the family of offensive lineman Nino Francavilla. So I was talking with Nino's father, who's a great guy and an everydayer. We appreciate you, Mr. Francavilla. Their family, for Nino, they live up in Toronto in Canada. And so, he flew down and the family to watch the spring game. And he was telling me, and it's mid-April now, and it's still snowing in Canada. Like, they have this ridiculous winter. I didn't even think April was still winter. Like, I thought winter was over. I'm a Floridian all my life, as you guys know, but it's still snowing up in Canada. So let me remind, if you are a high school recruit out there and you're watching Locked On Canes and you live somewhere in the Northeast where you have seasons, and seasons can be awful when you have winter, like, who wants that? Come down and play in Miami. Like, you leave, like, the Francavilla family leaves Toronto where it's like minus 20 wind chill and snowing, and you get down to 80 some odd degrees in Miami. Like, this is the place to be. So shout out to the Francavilla family. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. We need more Italians on this roster. We do. I mean, we need more Francavillas on this one. And we've had great Italians, Testaverde, my guy Dan Cilio. We've had some great Italian and Italian Americans and Italian Canadians now. We need to have more of these. So shout out to the Francavilla family, my paisans from up there north of the border. And yeah, folks, I know Miami had some big time recruiting visitors today. I didn't get a chance to talk with these guys, so I'm anxious to hear. I know my guy Marcus Benjamin from Rivals was talking to some of the recruits, how things went today with Tristan Keys, 5-star, who was out there, some of the other 4-star recruits. Now, I need to offer this follow-up because we did an episode about this on Friday night, and I always need to give the most relevant information. I'm getting a little nervous again about Jackson Cantwell. So Cantwell, number one player in the entire class of 2026. Miami is right there in it for Jackson Cantwell, the mammoth offensive tackle out of Nixa, Missouri. Top player in the class. Miami's right there, and they still are right up there near the top, where people kind of consider Miami, Georgia, and Oregon to be the top three. And, we read something last night from an Oregon insider. As of yesterday, on the Oregon side, they were a little bit nervous, right? They thought Miami was probably trending out in front, and Cantwell hadn't been out to Eugene. I mean, who wants to go out to Eugene? I think it's snowing there too, or it was recently. Like, he hadn't been out to Eugene in a while, so they're a little bit nervous. But as of this morning, I guess Dan Lanning convinced Cantwell, come out this week for a visit, Jackson. Come out to Eugene. So, for the Miami faithful, we're going to have to sweat this one out because Cantwell is going to make a visit to Eugene, Oregon on April 19th. So he's going to be there. I guess that's at the end of this coming week. So again, this is not to say Miami's out of it or anything, but obviously you go out there to make that special visit to Oregon, things start to trend a little bit more in their favor. So we will keep you guys updated when we get more intel on how that goes. In the meantime, make sure you smash that like button, smash that thumbs up, subscribe to Locked On Canes on YouTube, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app, wherever you get your pods. And we'll talk to you again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.